All right, this is the B Block Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Scott. Appreciate you for joining me. Catch me on YouTube. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Catching us on the podcast audio only platforms. Rate us. Make sure that you leave a review and tell your people about the podcast. So what I wanted to do here early, or I should say, what I wanted to do is to get in early on this Texans-Colts matchup that's coming up on Sunday. Now, look, we have several days to talk about this. I think I'll be back doing a live tomorrow to take some of your questions about this. And by the way, hit me up in the mailbag. Brandon K. Scott 07@gmail.com is a good place to hit me up. You can also obviously leave a comment in the chat or hit me up at Brandon K. Scott on Twitter. The DMs are open. If you got any questions about the Texans, any questions about the Rockets, or anything Houston sports related, I don't want to make it an ask me anything, but want to try out a little mailbag and see if I could take questions and go from there. But on this episode, I'd like to get in early on the Texans-Colts storylines that stick out to me ahead of the game. And I think it's appropriate if we just start with the quarterbacks. Like, there's plenty to go through in this game, but I think the main headliners in this game, the main storylines in this game, is the quarterbacks. And for me, the pressure that both of them are facing from like two different angles or two different kinds of ways. Like, look, the Texans and the Colts both have their future right in front of them. They control their own destiny. Obviously, the Colts are in the driver's seat. They have the better record. They're leading the AFC South. They take care of business against the Texans. They should win the AFC South. Of course, they have the Jaguars on their schedule as well, so they gotta take care of business against them as well. Their remaining schedule in some ways is unrelenting. You got Seattle on there toward the end as well, so the Colts are in for it. Like, let's not make any mistake about it. But just in terms of this game, I think you're looking at two quarterbacks that, despite the fact that they've had varying levels of success on their teams, on their current teams, that both of them are entering in this game. Both quarterbacks, CJ Stroud and Daniel Jones, enter this game under some amount of pressure. I think that part is fair to say. Both guys enter this game under some amount of pressure. Now, just to get out the news items out of the way before we get into the different kind of pressure that these guys are facing, should point out that CJ Stroud, as of Monday, was still in the concussion protocol. The reporting out there is though he is expected to clear the concussion protocol and play on Sunday. I don't think there's any real fear that CJ Stroud is not going to be available, and all signs point to him being ready to play on Sunday. So that's kind of the news, is that, yeah, he's still in the concussion protocol technically, but there's not a concern that he's going to remain there and not be available to play for them Sunday. And then with Daniel Jones, I'm seeing like vague reports of fibula, some kind of fibula injury, but from what I can tell, he's going to play through it. There's no expectation that it's going to keep him out. Now, I have been kind of eavesdropping in on Colts podcast and Indiana sports radio just to kind of get a beat on what they're talking about, get a finger on the pulse out there. And there is some concern about Daniel Jones, and not just his health, but his overall level of play. And that's what we're going to get into here when we talk about the different kind of pressure that both quarterbacks are facing going into this matchup. Now, with CJ Stroud, it comes from a couple of things. obviously the Texans have won their last 3 games without CJ Stroud out there. They are 3-0 in their last 3 games with their backup quarterback Davis Mills pinch hitting for CJ Stroud while he deals with the concussion and being in the concussion protocol. The Texans have been able to piece together some complementary type of wins. Defense has been outstanding. And Davis Mills, to his credit, came in there and really performed well, especially for backup quarterback standards. But in some cases, you might even just say, just for any quarterback, that some of the things that he was able to do for the Texans, especially late in games, down the stretch, some of the plays he was able to make on late downs, or in the case of, that Jacksonville game, the 14, 16-yard touchdown run or whatever it was to put them ahead, the 3rd and 16 and Nico Collins against the Tennessee Titans. And of course, the first half performance, that last drive, we talked about this on the podcast already, that last drive of the first half against the Bills, after the Texans had given up a really big play. I think that was right after the kickoff return for like 90 something yards. They go down there and engineer a 2-minute drive that puts them back ahead, and they never trail after that point. So, and a lot of that is credit to Davis Mills and his playmaking and him just being steady and being overall like just ready for the moment. I don't want to take anything away from Davis Mills, but what it has done now has kind of started this weird and awkward conversation about, well, if it looked like that with the backup quarterback, why is this offense so mediocre and at times less than that, worse than that, when the starter is out there, right? Like it is, even if you are like me and don't want to too much entertain these Davis Mills versus CJ Stroud conversations because you think they're silly and think that they're not really in good faith, even if you are like me and believe that, it is hard to ignore when the argument gets presented to you that one quarterback is 3-5 and the other one is 3-0. Right now, the obvious difference is that the one that's 3-5 has clearly played 5 more games and has had 5 more opportunities to lose games than the one that's 3-0. And I think that part is worth mentioning. But the recency bias, and I think the other part of it with CJ Stroud and the pressure that he's facing, and the reason why we're at this point in this strange space in the narrative, is that CJ Stroud, before he got injured, still had not quite, despite the fact that he had some good games and he's played well at various points in the season, he is still not quite fully shaken the narrative of him regressing since his rookie year. Like that part is still out there, both from the outside, and I think even within the Texans fan base, there is this notion that CJ Stroud just hasn't quite been as good since his rookie year. And so, and then he gets injured. And then his backup comes in there and wins 3 straight games. Doesn't just win 3 straight games by simply managing the game. There is some game management there, but as I just mentioned, made some really big plays, some really consequential plays that helped and allowed the Texans to keep their season alive while CJ Stroud deals with this concussion stuff. So there is pressure there. Like I think it's a step too far to be like, oh, if he doesn't play well, gonna start looking at Mills. Do you put Mills in? Like I think CJ Stroud should have enough of leeway and enough of a runway to kind of knock the cobwebs out and knock the rust off from the time that he hasn't played and still get the benefit of the doubt of being the better quarterback. But I can't ignore that there are people out there that don't believe that. And I can't ignore the possibility of, hey, And here's one thing we don't talk about a lot. What is the actual impact? Even if he passes concussion protocol, what is the actual impact of this concussion that clearly was severe enough to keep him out for 3 weeks, for three entire games, knocked him out of one game, and then kept him out for 3 more games after that? What is the impact of that? And if they start seeing, if they're able to see any kind of slippage in his game, do they go to Davis Mills as like not a better player, but a safer route given the circumstances? I don't think so. I don't think CJ Stroud is at any jeopardy of certainly not losing his job long term, but I don't even think he's in jeopardy of losing his job this season. So long as he goes out there and plays the way similar to how he had been before he got injured. Like I think CJ Stroud had some good enough games, and the offense was starting to trend in a decent enough direction. Now they didn't score no touchdowns in that Denver game, either with CJ Stroud or with Davis Mills after he got in there. And you can look at that and say, hey, this is another telltale sign of them just not being, they're going up against a really good Denver defense. And it's a telltale sign of the Texans offense just not really being up to snuff. But I know the hope is, from a Texan standpoint, is that the offense between Nick Caley, and we'll talk about the coaching matchup in a minute, but between Nick Caley and even CJ Stroud's ability to kind of take a bird's eye view of the offense and what they're doing and kind of see it from the sidelines, the hope is that they've been able to pick up on enough things that would allow him to not only pick up where Davis Mills is left off, but actually add more value to the Texans offense, given his talent and the fact that it's not just the floor that you're raising, with Davis Mills. So goes the narrative with Davis Mills, but you're actually raising the ceiling on what the offense can be. So I think CJ Stroud is facing the pressure of backup quarterback, just went 3-0 while you were out. Offense wasn't looking particularly good before then, despite some of your better performances. And then not being able to shake this narrative quite yet of regressing since the rookie year. That's out there. And this will be the first time we've seen him in 3 weeks with an opportunity to do that. Now with Daniel Jones, it's a different kind of pressure because unlike CJ Stroud, he has been playing for his team for the past few weeks. He has been out there, and Colts fans have had a chance to watch him and evaluate his play and decide how they feel about Daniel Jones as their quarterback. And let me tell you something. Let me tell you something for sure that I've noticed in my eavesdropping on Indiana media, Colts media, podcast, radio, and all that sort of thing. There is some serious nervousness about Daniel Jones. There is a lack of belief. The shine has worn off of this dude. Look, they are begging and pleading with this guy to go back to being the player that he was in the first 8 weeks of the season when the offense was better, in some cases by a mile, but the offense was much better than it is right now, and the best in the league at the time when Daniel Jones was playing like an MVP candidate, and it looked like all he needed was a change of scenery and a little Shane Steichen in his life and a little Jonathan Taylor in his life. And man, you would make that, you would turn that ugly duckling into a swan. And that's not what's been happening over the last few weeks. And the most recent example is their inability to really get anything going in the fourth quarter against the Kansas City Chiefs and losing that game despite leading something like 20-9 late in the game. And so Daniel Jones is facing the pressure of like this nervousness about him being the quarterback, this idea that which was being said even at the time by some people, but it was hard not to give him any credit. But this idea that what you've seen from him, the success that you've seen from him this year is fool's gold, and that you can always count on him to turn back into a pumpkin, that you can always rely on Daniel Jones to turn back into Daniel Jones. And that's just not exactly what you want as you're a franchise quarterback or the quarterback that's going to lead you to a championship. That question is still out there. I don't think people are convinced just because the Colts have 8 wins and just because they have one of the better offenses in football. You watch them cough that thing up against the Chiefs. You watch Daniel Jones not able to make plays in critical situations, whether that's because he's facing pressure or whatever the blitz is, or his play caller handcuffing him at times by not running the ball and asking them, I shouldn't say handcuffing them, asking them to do way more than probably should be asked to do, especially with a lead. Like whatever the reason is, Daniel Jones has not been it, at least not as of late. Let me pull up this stat, this little factoid that Stephen Holder, who covers the Colts for ESPN.com, I want to pull up this little factoid that he had on Daniel Jones that is worth noting and speaks to the pressure that he is facing playing against the league's number one defense in the Houston Texans, right? The league's number one defense. Daniel Jones versus the blitz. This is from Stephen Holder. Post this on Twitter. And I want to use the disclaimer here or mention here before I even give this stat that I'm not a big QBR guy. I believe in passer rating. I'm just being honest here. A QBR, quarterback rating, confuses me a little bit. I'm not a QBR guy. I'm a passer rating guy. But for whatever it's worth, and for anybody that is a QBR guy, let me present this to you from Stephen Holder at ESPN. Daniel Jones versus blitzes, weeks 1 through 8, posted a 93.4 QBR, which ranked second in that time period. Let's say that again. Daniel Jones, weeks 1 through 8, had a 93.4 QBR versus the blitz. This is versus the blitz. Weeks 1 through 8, 93.4 QBR, which ranks second for that time period for QBs versus the blitz. Since week 9, Daniel Jones versus the blitz has a 31 QBR. So from 93.4 in weeks 1 through 8 to 31 since week 9. And that's 20. That's good for 22nd in that time span versus the blitz. Now, Daniel Jones for his career is somewhere in between. He's nowhere near as good as the 93.4 QBR that ranked him second weeks 1 through 8. But he ain't nowhere near as bad, because how could he be, of the 31 QBR versus the blitz since week 9? He's somewhere at, let's see, the number is 59.9. So not smack dab in the middle, but somewhere in between what he was when he started the first 8 weeks of the season, or how it was when they started the first 8 weeks of the season, and what it's looked like the past few weeks of the season with how he's played. So obviously, I say all that to say there is a lack of belief in Daniel Jones that is more so based off of his own play over the last few weeks, as opposed to with CJ Stroud. Absence did not make the heart grow fonder. Like, you know how normally when your quarterback is out, I can even remember when he was concussed his rookie year when everything was going great, and you're doing the Case Keenum thing, and Case is getting the nod over Davis, and everyone's confused, but Case went out there and handled business against Tennessee. And people are like, man, would be show would be good when CJ Stroud gets back. Like when you believe in your starting quarterback, you're itching for him to get back. You can't wait for him to get back. You're welcoming him with open arms. And that's not exactly what's happening with CJ Stroud. There's this questioning of like, and it's not everybody. I don't want to be the straw man or the guy that's overgeneralized. And I think most people are excited to have CJ Stroud back and want to see CJ Stroud out there on the field. But there is this vocal minority that's like, man, you sure that the backup ain't the best? Like we're seeing this. Davis Mills is better for this system. I've seen I've seen credible people and schmucks say stuff like that. That Davis Mills is better for this system than CJ Stroud. I got to tell you, if that it to whatever degree that that's true, if it is, and I don't believe it is, but if it was, to hell with this system. The system can go yesterday if that be the case. That better not be the case. You better not have fired an offensive coordinator, brought in a new one, and then it turns out that the system is better for your backup than your franchise quarterback. That would be malpractice. So I hope that's not the case and don't believe that that's the case. But it's folks out there that's thinking that, wondering that, believing that. And he ain't played a game in 3 weeks. Absence has not made the heart grow stronger with or grow fonder, whatever the actual term is or saying is with that. It has not done that with CJ Stroud. And Daniel Jones, meanwhile, his presence has been frustrating and maddening for a lot of Colts fans, at least from my vantage point, from what I can tell from just like following them over the last few days. Now, the next thing is the coaching matchups, which I think will be key. It always is. It normally is, but I think in this one more so than any, or more so than most, that you have a pretty compelling matchup. I mean, look, Shane Steichen and D'Amico Ryans have been doing this back and forth now for years, even before they were head coaches, going back to their coordinator days when Shane Steichen was the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. And of course, D'Amico Ryans was the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. They had some pretty epic battles at that time and have since had some as head coaches with D'Amico with the Texans and of course Shane Steichen with the Colts. And so that's always a fun back and forth. That's always going to be a fun matchup every time those two meet up. The wrinkle and the wrinkle here and the cool element to this one this time is that D'Amico Ryans brings the number one defense to Indianapolis against Shane Steichen's number two offense, right? And it will be, if I'm not mistaken, if that's correct, right? Am I seeing that? It will be the second week in a row that the Texans go up against the number two offense, if I'm not mistaken. I think the Bills at the time last week, when they faced each other on Thursday Night Football, they at the time were the number two offense. And so, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the case. Check me on that, but I think that's right. And we saw how that worked out for the Texans and for D'Amico Ryans' defense. So you got the wrinkle of top two, in the Texans case, not two ranked units respectively for the head coaches, Ryans' defense versus Steichen's offense. But then the additional wrinkle on top of that, on top of them being ranked toward the top of the league or at the top of the league, is D'Amico Ryans' defense, but is Matt Burke that's been calling it. And it feels like they took a major step. It feels like, and this could be coincidence. I don't want to discount Matt Burke's imprint on things, but it could be a coincidence. It is the defense made in D'Amico Ryans' image and his overall scheme and philosophy that I think Matt Burke is simply carrying out and calling the plays and calling the game and just having a good beat on what it is that D'Amico Ryans wants to get out of the defense, and then having his own mind for defense as well. That has just made that a really good partnership. But no matter who you want to give the credit to or whatever, who you want to recognize, it is a defensive minded head coach with the number one defense going up against an offense that has been one of the better ones in the league. Now, when we talk about pressure with CJ Stroud and Daniel Jones, I feel like you can look at these coaches in a similar way, right? I don't think they're under as much pressure, nearly as much pressure as the quarterbacks, naturally because of those positions. But I do think you can look at both of them and say, despite their early success as head coach, they're both in their third season as head coach, if I'm not mistaken. Both of them in their third season. And of course, faced each other in the playoffs their first season as head coaches. And I think objectively, you would say that, like, if you just take away, if you look at it objectively and kind of just take away either your Texans fandom or your Colts fandom or your hatred for the other team in terms of how you view these coaches, if you just step away from it emotionally and look at it objectively, I'm pretty sure people who are not Texans or Colts fans look at both of those head coaches and deem their early run so far as success. I don't know how you could look at it any other kind of way, given that they've both been to the playoffs and at this very moment have winning records and units on their side of the ball, on their particular expertise side of the ball, ranking in the top two. Don't think you can argue with their success, no matter how you want to nitpick or evaluate or talk about their, like some people might have a problem with D'Amico Ryans' game management, right? Or Shane Steichen's play calling at a given time. However you feel about it, they've been successful. That being said, the honeymoon phase is over with both of them. I know enough about both places and how both coaches have been talked about this season. And with Shane Steichen, certainly recently after them collapsing to the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday. Talk about shine wearing off with Daniel Jones earlier. The honeymoon phase for D'Amico Ryans and Shane Steichen as young, new, fresh head coaches with fan bases that are rejuvenated by just their mere presence, that time is over with. It's like they don't have the number one defense or the number two offense or have won 3 games in a row to improve to 6-5 and control your own destiny in terms of getting to the playoffs, or an 8-3 record and controlling your own destiny in terms of not just getting to the playoffs, but winning the division, taking the division back from the Texans in the case of the Colts. It's like ain't none of that even the case. None of that is even the case. Texans fans, I'm seeing that. Yeah, y'all ever see that where a head coach is a renowned coordinator or was a very successful coordinator who got the head coaching job, and when things kind of go left a little bit, they start talking about how the guy is just a good coordinator. Like, he's a coordinator. Normally happens with black coaches, I would point out, but it happens from time to time. Like Matt Eberflus is a good example of this, a white coach. A good example of this last year, where eventually you're watching him trying to coach Caleb Williams and you see what he got in terms of an offensive staff. And then you just kind of think about it like, you know what? He was a really good defensive coordinator back in the day with the Colts. That might be what he needs to do. This happens from time to time with head coaches. And I've seen it happen recently with D'Amico Ryan. Some of the responses we get on social media at Sports Radio 610 when we post a D'Amico Ryan's quote or clip or audio or whatever it is, they're like, he's a defensive coordinator. He ain't a head coach. D'Amico, the shine is worn off. The honeymoon phase is over with. And I think now both coaches have an opportunity to sort of switch the narrative back at least for a week. At least for a week. You handle business against the Indianapolis Colts on the road, CJ Stroud back to win your fourth in a row. And now you're really in the driver's seat in terms of getting into the playoffs, whether that be through the division or through the wild card, which we can go over again in just a second. I know in the last live I did that I kind of went over the playoff odds. I felt like it was a little bit clunky, and so I'll attempt to do it again. But the coaching matchups are important in this one. And not just the head coaches, like obviously Shane Steichen. So let's just look at Shane Steichen for a second. The big criticism of Shane Steichen at the moment, and if you watch that Colts Chiefs game on Sunday, this would have stood out to you as well. Given that their best player is Jonathan Taylor, their running back, and given that they had a lead late in the game, it is incomprehensible and I think unforgivable for him to only touch the ball 2 times in the fourth quarter. He had 1 carry, and I think they threw the ball to him once for like 7 yards or something like that. But that's not nearly enough touches for your best player when you have a 20-9 lead late in the game. And so this is the big criticism right now is like, man, was Shane Steichen either feeling himself too much or trying to do too much with Daniel Jones? How could he not know that his best way to secure that, even if he wanted to go conservative, and this was a criticism of the Texans I didn't necessarily agree with, but criticism of the Texans on Thursday when they didn't really put their foot on the gas or their foot on the neck of the Buffalo Bills and kind of just got out of there with a win at the end. Like, even if you were going to do that from a Colts standpoint, you figured that the strategy there would be to get a ball to Jonathan Taylor. He had 1 carry in the fourth quarter. He had 2 touches. They were 3 and out, and just giving the ball back, just putting the game back in the hands of their defense and putting the ball back in the hands of Patrick Mahomes inexplicably. Inexplicably. And so I think that's a legit criticism of Shane Steichen's play calling in that particular game. And this will be an opportunity, of course, for him to redeem himself, given who the opponent is and given where they are right now. The Colts had 3 possessions in the fourth quarter. All 3 of those possessions in the fourth quarter, they were leading. And they went 3 and out in every one of them. They ran it 1 time in all of those plays. So to sum it up, they did not run the clock and they did not get the ball. They were not intentional enough about getting the ball to their best offensive player. And so the coaching matchup from that standpoint, does Shane Steichen, does the film to Shane Steichen reflect the criticism of the public that he should lean more into Jonathan Taylor in moments like that? And or do they make a more concerted effort to feature Jonathan Taylor against this defense? And then that's the head coaching battle, but then even the coordinator battle of Nick Caley, Texans offensive coordinator, against Lou Anarumo, the Colts defensive coordinator. I think that'll be an interesting back and forth. More so, like, look, Lou Anarumo has the experience and the pelts on the wall in comparison. Like, I think if you look at experience and track record, that's going to go advantage Lou Anarumo. Even if you're talking about, and I think this part is key, you're talking about a mediocre to less than so Texans offense going up against a mediocre to less than so Colts defense to that I would say, to its credit, played well enough, I thought, to beat Kansas City. The dam broke eventually, but I thought they played winning football. I thought that they played well enough to beat Kansas City. And if the offense can just go out there and get a first down or two, if they can just feature their best player a time or two, or 3 or 4, maybe. Doesn't seem like it's too much to ask. If they could have done that, that defensive effort that they got would have been enough to win the game. But it's not a very good defense. And in kind, it has not been through the course of the season a very good offense for the Texans, though it's looked a lot better as of late. How do Nick Caley and Lou Anarumo, respectively, go about attacking these mediocre opposing units with their own mediocre units? What exactly does that look like? I also feel like the styles play into each other. Like the Colts have kind of had this bend but don't break sort of mantra. And I don't know, maybe mantra is not the right word, but that's kind of been their identity, is like bend but don't break. They'll give up some good some big plays, some plays here or there. They'll give up plays, I should say, but they'll also get off the field, right? Like they got the 23rd total defense, but they're ninth in points allowed. You know? So they got the 28th ranked passing defense, but they're 7th in rushing defense. So they got a lot of highs and lows, boom or bust. Their pass rush is not particularly scary. Like they don't have world beat. They've been without DeForest Buckner, and outside of them, they don't have like necessarily a super dynamic pass rusher. And so the Texans offensive line in some ways get a break there. I know Latu has had some moments, but hasn't quite been getting the sack totals that I think you would expect from somebody that's drafted that high. Like it's mid versus mid, and I'm trying to see which coach is gonna emerge out of the two. Which play caller is gonna emerge out of the two for the Texans offense and this Colts defense. So looking forward to the quarterbacks exercising their demons, would you say? Would you say that the quarterbacks are exercising their demons and the coaching matchups are pretty critical as well? I point out that my non-quarterbacks to watch are Jonathan Taylor, Nico Collins, and Will Anderson Jr. Jonathan Taylor, for reasons that I mentioned earlier, did not get the ball in some critical moments when they could have iced the game, or at the very least given themselves a better chance to ice the game. Jonathan Taylor makes a good case for, he's not just their best player, but he's made a good case for league MVP at times this year. He's been that good. And they, for whatever reason, decided not to feature him late in the game when it was time to ice it. So I would have an eye out for Jonathan Taylor in any game that he plays in, but especially one where it's like this. Especially one where everybody knows that Shane Steichen got away from him too early or unnecessarily, and that he shouldn't have. So I want to see what that looks like. Um, and just to go back real quick to the coaching matchups, I mentioned the stylistically how I think they fit or make an interesting contrast, whereas the Colts defense has a lot of bend but don't break in it. Always has, honestly, no matter who their defensive coordinator is. But they got a lot of bend but don't break, a lot of bend but don't break to them. Whereas the Texans are operating with this death by 1,000 cuts sort of strategy, running the ball, dinking and dunking, short and intermediate, being a lot more selective with the shots as opposed to just being straight up aggressive with the shots. Taking what the defense gives, not going broke, making a profit, all those cliches. Like that's the way that this offense wants to operate. And this defense has shown itself, this Colts defense has shown itself to be one that will let you get some yards, move the ball, make some plays on them here and there. But they'll also get off the field. They'll give up some plays, but then they'll get off the field. Not a very good third down defense, but not allowing a lot of points. Tied for seventh in takeaways. 12th in red zone defense. So, yeah. And it makes sense for them to be good in the red zone if they're good against the run, right? So, yeah. Now, as I mentioned, Jonathan Taylor, one of my non-QBs to watch. Also, Nico Collins, think he's worth mentioning. Somebody that's had some pretty big games against the Colts, and somebody who I think that, all season long, we've been talking about how they need to feed Nico Collins. And credit to Davis Mills, did a pretty good job of doing that. Big reason why they've won these last few games. Expect that to be the case. I mean, look, one of the cooler moments of this run so far since CJ Stroud's been the quarterback is that first play of the game against the Colts, rookie season, last game of the season. Did I? I'm sorry. Did I say earlier that they played in the playoffs? Scratch that if I did. And hopefully I did not. I'm not gonna go back and edit it out if I did. I'm just gonna be honest. If I did, I misspoke. And hopefully you caught that as I misspoke. They played. See, it always felt like that last game of the year that they played in 2023 felt like a playoff game, and it had a playoff sort of atmosphere. Once I watched that at a bar, and it felt that way. Playoff implications, playoff vibe. So hopefully I didn't say that earlier. If I did, my mistake. But that game that I'm talking about, the season finale in 2023, where from said go, man, they didn't waste no time getting aggressive. CJ Stroud a bomb to Nico Collins. Like that is one of the highlights of this era so far. That particular play for me at least. So how much do they get Nico Collins involved? Is it a Nico game? Is it a spread the ball around game? Some of CJ Stroud's best games this season so far have been some of those spread the ball around games. Do we see that? I'm feeling like this has got to be, or this at least should be, a Nico Collins game, especially the later you get into the season. You need to be doing what you can to rely on your best players, putting your best players in the best position to win. And then, of course, Will Anderson Jr. kind of fits along the same lines of Jonathan Taylor of like, hey, if this guy is playing, that's a guy to watch. I don't know. I don't know what his numbers are going to be. I don't know how many sacks he's going to have. I just know he's going to have these moments where, look, and the Colts offensive line is one of the better ones in football. But Will Anderson is going to have these moments where he embarrasses somebody or just outworks somebody and makes Texans fans glad that they have Will Anderson on their team and makes the opposing team wish that they had either him or somebody like him on their team. So those are my guys to watch. Real quick on these playoffs odds, because I've already gone way longer than I intended to on this episode. I just want to reiterate, because I've heard and seen a lot of conversation about, can you still win the division and what do the Texans need to do? And it's a lot of just like talking. And of course, I'm not criticizing that because here I am talking. But I do think that it is worth just remembering and considering what it all looked like. Okay. What does it all really mean? And where the Texans stand now. Obviously, the Colts losing helped the Texans' chances in chasing them down for the division. Obviously, they played them twice. And if they do well enough in the 4 games in between that, right, they play them twice and they got 4 games in between. If you're better in the 4 games in between, then, or at the very least the same, and you beat them, then you win. You win the division. That's a little bit harder to predict, given that these are the bookmark games. You play them next and then you play them last. Who the hell knows what's going to happen for either team in those 4 games in between? You can try to guess and try to predict, but it's just a bit of a wild card. No pun intended. It's hard to predict. So I broke this down in my last live and just want to kind of reiterate that the Texans' opponents in terms of quality of wins are essentially tiered up, right? 6 opponents, 3 tiers with 2 teams per opponent. Really, one of the tiers is just one team, but you play them twice, right? And that tier system is this: the Chiefs and Chargers. I wonder if I could do this. I forget that I actually can do this. And if you're on the audio only, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to see what I'm about to do here. But I'm going to give it a shot. Let us see. Let us see. Here it is. Bam. I should have thought of this before I actually before I actually tried to do it. But here we are nonetheless. Let's see. Forgive me, audio only people, because you don't know, like, why is he fumbling through this in this way? All right. So I got this pulled up, the athletics playoff simulator that I went over in the last episode that I did. But the reason why I break down the opponents in tiers is because the odds do change based off of who you beat and who you lose to. Okay. If you're looking at this right now, if you're looking at this playoff simulator that the Athletic has, you'll see here that the Texans have a greater than 99% chance of winning, or I'm sorry, of making it to the playoffs if they just simply win every game. We don't have to make this complicated. Win all the damn games and you'll get in the playoffs. All right. That would be ideal. That would be ideal. They'd probably even, if you see here, they'd probably even host a wild card and actually win the division. If I filter this right, if they win all their games, they got a 96% chance of winning the division. Okay. So that's cool. Let's go back to make the playoffs. Now let's look at this from the bottom up in terms of tiers. Okay. So the top tier to me, all right, and I think the math dictates this. It's not just me saying it. It's Chiefs and Chargers, because you're in the wild card race. You face both of those teams, and they're in the wild card race with you. The Colts obviously are in the mix as well, just in terms of the math of it all. But of course, you are in the mix of chasing them down for the AFC South. And then the least relevant teams are Cardinals, Raiders. So let's look at them, right? The least valuable combination of wins are Cardinals, Raiders. So watch what I do here if I make this a loss. Okay. And I explained this in the last live, but I want to do it again. Texans beat the Colts, Chiefs, Chargers, and Colts again. They can lose to the Cardinals and Raiders and have a 97% chance of making the playoffs. All right. If the Texans lose to the Colts both times, those numbers are still pretty good. They drop from 90-something% to 84%. But if they lose to the Colts on the bookends here and handle business against the Chiefs, Cardinals, Raiders, and Chargers, 84% chance of making the playoffs according to the Athletics simulator. Okay. Not as good as when it was Cardinals Raiders and it was 96%, but still pretty damn good at 84%, or I'm sorry, 83%. If you just simply lose to the Colts and beat everybody else. But watch how it changes if you lose to the Chiefs and the Chargers. That number goes from 80-something% down to 60% now. You see how this matters, which teams you beat, which teams you don't. These two cupcake teams, and nobody's saying that you should lose to the Chargers or the Raiders. That would be ridiculous. But if you did and beat everybody else, that would be ideal. That would be, or I should say, maybe not ideal, because it happens before you play the Chargers and the Colts, and you're not going to feel great about them going into those games if they lose either one of these two. But let's play it out this way, where if they lose to the Chiefs and the Cardinals, 88% chance or 87% chance of making the playoffs. If they lose to the Cardinals and Chargers, same thing. If they lose to the Chiefs and Raiders, 86%, 87% chance of making it. Lose to the Chargers and Raiders, same thing. Right? It goes down, and your most valuable opponents at this point are the Chiefs and the Chargers. You lose against them, and your playoff chances go down to around 59, 60%. So the key, again, is going 4-2. Any combination of 4-2 helps your chances. 3-3 is not good. But you really want to beat these two teams, the Chiefs and the Chargers. And at the very least, split with the Colts. That's what you want to do. So, anywho, thought that was worthwhile. Did not mean to go a full hour, just me talking by myself. Thought this was going to be half this, but when I get going, this is just kind of how it goes sometimes. You know, I still had other stuff I wanted to get to. You're going to check out the Rockets Collective, some of my Rockets thoughts. Of course, they're going up against the Warriors this week. By the time you see this, you might be running up against that game. Check out Rockets Collective with myself, Will, and Brado holding it down. Give you everything you need on the Rockets. We kind of did just like a 15-game overview, season so far overview. Talked about Amin Thompson. Talked about the Dylan Brooks Rockets reunion that they had in Phoenix. That was kind of charming, especially since the Rockets got the win. And so, yeah, that's where you can go check that out if you got any, if you're curious about any like Rocket stuff that you didn't quite in this episode. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow. I say tomorrow, like you're just going to catch this on the same day. We're going to do another one of these on Wednesday, but that one's probably going to be live. That's the mailbag episode that I mentioned earlier. If I don't get enough questions for the mailbag, man, we're just going to go live and see how it looks with y'all in real time. But for now, I am Brandon Scott, the host of the B Block Podcast. Make sure that you subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, and until next time, y'all be good.